My name is Lindsay. I am a 30-year-old who works from home. My husband, who never pays attention to the precious treasure we've lost, is always concerned only about himself. Who could have imagined that money could change someone so much? We cannot go back to what we used to be. I can only mourn the lost treasure. I realized that I had begun to harbor intense hatred in my heart towards my harsh-speaking husband and mother-in-law. The beginning of my relationship with my husband was when a friend introduced us. At that time, concerned about my poor luck in love, a friend introduced me to my future husband. As we met and started communicating daily and seeing each other more often, I naturally began to think about him, enjoying my unrequited love. It didn't take long to start dating after he proposed with the intention of marriage. Without any problems, we smoothly progressed to marriage, never having fought. And soon our family grew to 3. The first fight we ever had was a while after our daughter Katie began attending kindergarten. Since then, my husband started coming home late and spending his weekends away from home. Even when at home, he was inseparable from his mobile phone, always carrying it around. Previously, no matter how busy he would rush home after work. And on weekends, he devoted his time to Katie. However, as if it were all a lie, he no longer spent time with Katie or even me. Steve, what's been going on lately? What do you mean? You've been coming home late and not playing with Katie, who's feeling lonely. Why don't you play with her yourself? What? Stop pushing everything onto me when I'm tired every day. It's different for you, who's always at home. He said, shockingly unlike the man I had known before. Since I continued my freelance work from home, which I had been doing before we got married, it was difficult to find time for Katie, especially close to deadlines. So, when he leaves the house on weekends, Katie, being considerate, would say, "Katie, I'll draw next to mommy," making it impossible for me to work. Discussing these changes in my husband and Katie's situation with my parents, who live nearby, they readily agreed to take care of Katie, saying, "For our dear granddaughter." Thus, lately, they have been frequently playing with Katie, sparing her from feeling lonely. However, when an unexpected meeting comes up and I can't ask my parents, and I ask my husband, he snaps. Why do I have to take care of her on my days off? Just take her with you. I told you it's a work meeting, it's impossible. Don't push it onto me then. It's not pushing it. It's none of my business. He said indifferently over the phone, which had become a normal response by then. Feeling a change in my feelings towards my husband, Katie, clinging to my leg, whispered, "Mommy." It might have been heard over the phone. And it wasn't the content that should have been heard by her, making me regret not being more considerate. While apologizing to reassure her, I met her gaze and hugged her. And she hugged me back with all her might. Feeling fulfilled by Katie's warmth, she said, "Mommy, I'm going to Grandma's." I was a bit surprised since I had planned to take her after getting permission. "Mommy, you have work, right? I really want to play with you, but it's okay, because Grandma will buy me a toy," she said with her usual cute smile. After explaining the situation, I took her to my parents, and by the time we arrived, it was as if nothing had happened, with Katie happily playing with my father. However, who could have predicted that this would be the last conversation between Katie and my parents? During the meeting, I received several calls from an unknown number. Annoyed by the persistence, I answered to find out that Katie and my parents had died in an accident. The news sent a chill through me. On the other side of the phone, someone was speaking, but it felt like nothing but air as I couldn't believe it. I thought I just said goodbye a while ago. I understand somewhere in my mind that I won't see Katie or my parents again. I rushed from the meeting place and frantically tried to contact my husband. But despite repeated calls, he was unreachable, increasing my frustration. Considering he hadn't come home since last night, I thought he might be with his mistress. But at that point, I didn't care. I wanted to lash out at my unreachable husband in this emergency. Holding back my anger towards my husband, I faced the silent reality of having lost my loved ones all at once. Struggling to find words amidst the grief, feeling empty inside. I thought, why? Why did this happen? We were just laughing together. Don't leave me. Call me mommy and play with me. I clung to my daughter repeatedly while crying. But the daughter who used to call me with a sweet mommy would never wake up again. After various police procedures, the funeral was held later. Unable to sort out my feelings, and not having properly said goodbye. The empty room made the reality of Katie's absence all the more stark. In that lonely room, I spent several days unable to do anything, becoming like a shell. When my husband finally returned, it was a few days after Katie had passed. Whoa. Why are you crying? What do you mean why now that you've finally come home? What do you mean? Where's Katie? She's dead. What? That's why she died in an accident with my parents. Didn't I tell you? What? If you were with your lover, you wouldn't be looking at my messages, would you? It seemed the husband, who thought he hadn't been caught, awkwardly averted his gaze from Lindsay. My bad. What are you apologizing for? The affair. No. You should be apologizing for not noticing the messages and not coming to see Katie. And isn't it about not spending time with Katie because you were too caught up in your affair? But I felt my blood boiling as my husband, despite everything I conveyed, would not apologize sincerely and only made excuses. I'm sorry about Katie. Just make sure you attend the wake and the funeral and act like a father should. Understood. And this affair ends here. Make sure it's over by the time we say our final goodbye to Katie. That's what being a father is about. Got it, I'll handle it. I haven't forgiven him for what he did to Katie. However, looking me in the eye, he replied earnestly, and I decided to believe his words. Though not completely ready to move forward, I gradually began to regain my strength and slowly returned to daily life for the sake of Katie and my parents. Then, one day, for some unknown reason, my husband returned to his former kind self. Worried about me mourning the three, he asked his mother, Laura, to help, and she came rushing over to support with household chores. Even when I told her I was okay, after a while, she would come running whenever I tried to do something and take over, as if snatching the chores away from me, saying, You should rest, Lindsay. Initially, using her husband's business trips as an excuse, she would stay over 2 days a week, saying, I'll stay over tonight. But now, it had increased to more than half the week, with her saying, I might as well stay since I'll have to come tomorrow anyway. As if it was natural for her to be there. Laura, I can manage on my own now. You don't need to hold back. I can't rely on you forever. Your son asked me to help, so don't worry about it, she said kindly while preventing me from doing any household chores. While I was still trying to sort out my feelings after the loss of Katie and my parents, the continuous presence of my mother-in-law became a great stress. When I happened to overhear something. By the way, has Lindsay received the money yet? Money? Oh, the inheritance? Not yet. Is the financial process after the funeral, I wonder? Well, probably no rush. Make sure you check properly, or it will all be taken by someone else. I know, I'm on it. If that happens, I don't see why I'm helping out so much every day if it's such a hassle. How did Lindsay seem? She seemed bothered by me staying so often. She said she wanted to start doing things herself, but I'm making sure she doesn't. Hearing this conversation between my husband and mother-in-law was accidental. But this is my house. I wonder if they weren't worried about being overheard. Then came the day of the wake and the funeral. I was running around meeting with the service providers and the church. And my husband was greeting relatives on my behalf. Previously, he wouldn't have done anything without being told. But being his daughter, I felt he was genuinely reflecting on his past behavior. However, I had mentioned his past attitude to my mother. And the relatives were blaming him, saying, "Wasn't Katie feeling lonely? It's really sad for Katie, so young. At least be a proper father for once." Yet, he listened without arguing back and was tearful. The days he didn't come home continued, and he had stopped playing with Katie. But it seemed he genuinely cared about Katie, which was a bit reassuring. I had hoped he would have noticed and returned on his own while Katie was alive. But now that she is gone, such regrets are meaningless. Thinking about this, watching the tears fill his eyes, I also started crying uncontrollably. I had kept telling Katie that I was busy at work, but now I regretted it more than ever. I should have indulged her more. I should have played with her more. Somehow, we managed to get through the wake and funeral and sent the three off. When I returned home late, my husband and, naturally, my mother-in-law were there. She might have heard something at the funeral earlier. Then, just like the other day, taking advantage of my absence, she said, "The inheritance is supposedly $3 million, right?" I heard about it. What? I didn't know about the inheritance. I told you to check properly. Well, Lindsay couldn't have talked about it before the funeral. Well, it can't be helped. So, what about the $3 million? If there's that much, give me a share too. I helped out despite it being troublesome. Just hours after the wake and funeral, my husband and mother-in-law were smiling and discussing the inheritance. Suddenly, as if struck by a thought, the mother-in-law said, "With $3 million, why not buy a luxury condo?" Indeed, buying a luxury condo wouldn't use up all $3 million. Sounds like a plan. We better start looking when we get home. Well, but the inheritance. Caught up in the excitement, my mother-in-law cut off my husband and said something unexpected. "Lindsay hasn't received it yet, right? I haven't seen her handle any procedures. For now, let's just borrow." "You mean take out a loan? Is that really okay?" "It should be fine as long as you keep an eye on Lindsay." They were talking without realizing I was listening. Just after the funeral, these two were discussing money as if it were the most natural thing. Without mourning Katie's death, which disgusted me. I was foolish to believe that he had faced Katie properly. And returned to being the husband he once was. What does "I'm sorry" even mean? You don't think you've done anything wrong. You just apologized because I was being persistent. At the funeral, you were just silent because you didn't want to be blamed by the relatives. You might think you're sad about Katie's death. But you don't think you've done anything wrong and only apologized for the sake of money. Realizing this now, I feel foolish, but I've apologized to Katie in my heart over and over again. Even though I can never meet her again. I couldn't just let those two carry on like this. One day, out of the blue, he told me, I bought a luxury condo. I wasn't too surprised because I had overheard him talking with his mother. But he still doesn't seem to realize his major misunderstanding. What? It would be nice to live with my parents from now on, right? That's why I bought it. What are you talking about? We have an inheritance of $3 million, so it's fine, right? What? Were you planning to keep it all to yourself? No, listen. Thinking I would deny it, my husband didn't listen to me and just overlaid his own narrative. I never thought you were such a petty person. I'm disappointed. Hey, I haven't received any inheritance yet, so how did you buy it? I had my parents cover it. Watching him avert his gaze while speaking, I knew he was lying. He still hasn't realized that he always looks away when he lies. First of all, why did you decide to buy it without discussing it with me? Are we supposed to go back to normal after the funeral? It's because you wouldn't talk. Just because you apologized doesn't mean you're forgiven, that's why I wasn't talking. You. As I stated my case calmly, it seemed to anger my husband. And just as he was about to speak, his mother arrived. Laura. Knowing they had been sneaking around, I wasn't surprised when she suddenly asked. Thank you, Lindsay. For letting us buy the luxury condo. No, what are you talking about? The mother-in-law made eye contact with my husband upon hearing my words. The inheritance is $3 million, right? That's why we bought the luxury condo. I wasn't informed about that. That's what I'm telling you now. I couldn't help but feel irritated by her condescending tone. What does the inheritance have to do with you, Laura? I'm not planning to leave this house. You can do as you please. But keeping the inheritance all to yourself is not right, is it? What are you talking about? If you're receiving the inheritance, then my son can use it too. No, that's irrelevant. It seemed my husband didn't understand either, but like mother, like son. Neither really understood anything. As I was dumbfounded by their words, an unexpected phrase was thrown at me. If you married into our family, it's only natural you should contribute to your in-laws. What? So we're using the inheritance. Any complaints? If you have complaints, why not divorce? I'm fine with it. Since you can't do it, just follow along without complaining. Thinking she must feel like a queen. I was dumbfounded by such words. And equally astounded by my husband who so easily suggested divorce. As he watched the argument between my mother-in-law and me without changing his expression. My husband finally spoke. Enough, talking won't change anything. Let's get a divorce. I was given a cold look unlike ever before, but I thought that should have been my line. Our marital life has been broken anyway, no complaints, right? He must have been intending to divorce if I showed any negativity. Seeing me nod, he left the divorce papers. And suddenly prepared his belongings and left with his mother. Not even glancing at Katie's portrait as they naturally walked out. I quickly filed the divorce papers, ending my relationship with my husband. Because he knew where I lived. I thought about moving in case of an emergency but decided against it. Sure, there are many memories with my husband, but more importantly, this house is filled with memories of Katie, and I couldn't bring myself to leave it. Because I haven't gotten over the sadness of losing Katie, I still wanted to cling to the past. Just as I was getting used to living alone, my ex-husband suddenly visited. Hey. When are you going to transfer the inheritance? What? What are you talking about? It's the inheritance, the inheritance. I took out a loan to buy the luxury condo because you haven't transferred the money. And now I can't make the payments. What are you even talking about? Do you think you're actually going to receive the inheritance? That's what I've been saying before the divorce. What, are you talking like an alien? Inheritance from my parents isn't communal property, so you can't receive it. What? The only things you were supposed to receive have already been given to you. And you have no right to the inheritance. That's why I kept saying it's irrelevant. The husband, who seemed to genuinely believe he was entitled to receive something, lost his earlier momentum and seemed at a loss for words. Then what about the loan? I took out a loan thinking I'd get the inheritance to buy the luxury condo. That has nothing to do with me, right? You decided to buy it and take out a loan on your own. It's your fault for not explaining properly. What am I supposed to do now? I quit my job a long time ago thinking I'd get the inheritance and I have no income. You have $3 million, so you should pay off the loan and give me living expenses. Despite his self-made decisions, his words were too audacious, and I lost my patience. Enough. You made the decision and misunderstood on your own. And now you expect me to fix it? You're the one who made the decision. And all you care about is money. You've never cared about Katie. You're really selfish. What kind of nerve do you have? You're too selfish. But I'm really in trouble. If he can't understand what I'm saying, there's nothing more to say. If you can't think of anything to say but that after all I've said, and you haven't even prayed for Katie, then that's it. Whether you can't pay your debts or live, it's none of my business. I have no intention of helping you, so please don't come back. I conveyed this calmly to my husband and pushed him out of the house vigorously. I heard my husband's panicked voice, but I chose to ignore it and was about to close the door. Suddenly, it got noisy outside, and I heard a stern voice berating my husband, "Hey, wait." The voice, which was calm yet forceful, belonged to my father-in-law. Father-in-law had, of course, attended the wake and funeral and was the first to extend his condolences, saying, "It must be tough losing your parents and Katie. I also can't bear the thought of never seeing that child again." While his eyes brimmed with tears, despite his own grief, he asked, "Are you sleeping okay? Eating well? If there's anything I can do, don't hesitate to ask." He treated me like his own daughter, always with a kind smile. Encouraged by such kindness, I finally told my father-in-law what my husband had said. My husband told me to pay off the loan for the luxury condo with the inheritance I received. But what does that mean? After all, the inheritance has nothing to do with my husband, and we're divorced. So I thought it had nothing to do with me. Pretending not to notice the flustered looks on my husband and mother-in-law, I asked my father-in-law somewhat apologetically. Then I heard my father-in-law's voice for the first time so sternly questioning. "You told Lindsay, who just lost Katie and her parents, such a thing?" Even though my mother-in-law desperately tried to defend him with, "Dear, that's not it." And my husband tried to excuse himself with, "But she said." Father-in-law didn't trust them and stood by me. "If you hadn't started this, Lindsay wouldn't have said anything." Father-in-law, unaware of the situation, looked truly regretful. "I'm sorry for troubling you during such a difficult time. And, well, I told him everything about what they were whispering about the inheritance, the purchase of the luxury condo, and the terrible things my mother-in-law had said. Hearing my words, my father-in-law, even though he had heard something from my mother-in-law, seemed not to know everything. Thus, he apologized with a sad yet angry voice. "I really don't know what to say to you, Lindsay." And he promised, "I will make sure they never come here like today again." I thanked him and saw the three of them off. As I was closing the door, I could hear my husband and mother-in-law repeatedly making excuses to my father-in-law. Again and again, they said things like, "Lindsay is just misunderstanding. We were getting along with Lindsay. Believe us." It was nothing but self-serving excuses. However, wanting nothing more to do with them, I simply ignored their pleas and closed the door. At the month memorial service afterward, only my father-in-law attended. My husband and mother-in-law seemed to have wanted to come together. But my father-in-law respected my wish to have nothing to do with them, so he came alone. He apologized again very politely for what my husband and mother-in-law had done, saying, "I'm truly sorry for what happened." And together we prayed for the repose of Katie and my parents' souls. In the end, the luxury condo was sold because they couldn't make the loan payments. Father-in-law didn't know the home had become a luxury condo until he returned. from a business trip and told me with a wry smile. I was really surprised. Ultimately, I divorced my husband without any division of property. And he was shocked to hear that I had kicked her out along with my husband. He must be desperately paying off that debt, he said with a slight laugh. But his eyes weren't smiling. Without many words, I understood that was his answer. Now that all the procedures and problems have been resolved, I finally feel like I can live a peaceful daily life again. From now on, I will pray for the repose of my parents and Katie and live strongly for those watching over me from the sky, thinking of them every day.